Hi, I'm Dwayne Morton. As someone who has navigated some of life's most difficult, unlikely, and untimely circumstances, I understand what it feels like to battle those challenges alone. That's why I created ShowUp2Heal. This podcast is for the people who feel unheard, unseen, and unloved. This is where you can come and hear true stories and where man can have real conversations. But most importantly, this is a place where we're creating a community so you can feel supported. I want you to feel in this community that you are seen, heard, and loved. And if no one else has told you today, I love you. Welcome to Show Up to Heal. All right, everyone. Day 12 of the Show Up to Win presents Show Up to Heal podcast. I'm super excited, super grateful. Brian Bogart is an amazing human being, but also someone that he does things the way that I want to do it. He's a disruptor. He's a leader and just an amazing, amazing, kind person, but he does stuff for others so much. And so I'm going to bring him up. I'm your host, Dwayne Morton, Mr. Show Up to Win himself. And I'm so grateful to be able to have these speakers coming on. And this one is probably one of my favorites so far. All right, Brian, let's get you up here on stage.
I'm happy to be
You've
here,
been on
man.
many stages. Pardon?
I said I'm happy to be here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so grateful, so happy you're here, but also just the way the kind of human being you are. So let me read your bio, because for the people who doesn't know who you are, this will tell the type of person he is. Brian doesn't start outside with what you need to do. He starts inside with who you are. In a world that is disconnected, Brian is revolutionizing how individual leaders and entrepreneurs deeply connect with their authentic selves to achieve the best version of themselves. At just 7 years old, Brian was faced with a traumatic injury that most of us can barely even imagine. He was run over by a truck and his left arm was severed from his body. After years of intensive rehabilitation and over 24 surgeries, Brian has a deep lived understanding of how physical, emotional, and mental pain can keep people buried regardless of what their initial trauma was. His belief that everyone's story is as important as his own is what makes him one of the most accessible, relatable, and authentic individuals you will ever meet. This is one of the best bios, man. And it's true. Every word of it is true of the person you are.
Thank you.
And I can't imagine having to sit back and hear people say that about you and just be like, wow, that's me.
I've never been a big fan for bios and read bios, but it's largely because I didn't know how to receive it for a long time either. And so, yeah, it's a little strange still for me to hear words written about me. But at the end of the day, we're all human, and that's what I want people to feel and understand. We don't need any more sages on the stages. We don't need any more people that are, fabricating their expertise. We need relevance. We need connection. We need relatability. We need accessibility. We need love, man, and some compassion. And so, I know men's mental health is a really, really, really big factor. And frankly, there's a lot of stigma around just the whole concept. And I'm slowly, right, in the ways that I'm capable of doing so, trying to disrupt what's acceptable as normative conversation, right? To truly normalize the conversations that need to be had. Because frankly, we all want the same things, but there's all of these components that just keep us from having it until we decide to break the pattern. So.
Absolutely. And this actually moves right on to my first question, my friend. What do you feel like we're doing correctly in the men's mental health space? What do you feel like we're doing wrong? And what do you feel like we could do better?
Yeah. It's a loaded question, because I don't intend to vilify anybody or any concept, but at the same time, there's a lot of toxicity that's out there, right? And look, I turned 41 this summer. I was raised in the era, and so were many other people my age or older, that, you know, it was be seen, not heard, right? Put a smile on, push through and show up and perform, and don't pay attention to your emotions. Don't feel them. Don't understand them. And, you know, we call it mental health, but it's so much more than that, because it's not just intellectual. It is truly emotional, and it's embodied. And so where do I think we're doing things well? I see a huge trend of people in my general age range, 5 years plus, 10 years after, that are doing the work to heal themselves, doing the work to acknowledge things that we were told not to pay attention to when we were kids. And again, that's no slight on our parents. It's just the sign of the times and where we were at. But, you know, I'm a father of a 12-year-old son. And so I look at this through a couple of different angles. It's not just mental health for men in general, but it's like young men. And what are we teaching them? And how are we training them? And how are we raising them? And, you know, I still see a lot of just not acknowledgement of who the kids are, but focusing on the performative nature of things. I'm somebody that, because of my injury and other variables in my life, I learned to receive love, validation, and connection through performance, which meant it was always contingent upon what I did rather than who I was. And so what do I think we're doing well? I think we are normalizing more conversations. I think we're seeing a huge trend where kids my age and that generation are going to have a better opportunity to just overly communicate about where they're at and communicate with it. My son's on the autism spectrum, and he can verbalize his emotions on any given day. If he's at capacity, if he's having an emotional high, like roller coaster of a day, he'll even say something like, Dad, I had a really rough day, or I'm having a hard time regulating today, or hey, could you have a little more extra grace with me today? Right? And he's asking for permission, but he's also asking for safety. And so I think that's where we're not creating a lot of positivity in men's health. I think there's still a lot of men that are afraid to talk about emotions and call it emotional safety. Even the guys, if we call it mental health, like, okay, cool, but it's not just a mental thing. That's what I was saying earlier. It's so much more than that. And so if we truly want to be healthy and we truly want to be aligned, it's not just about mental health or mental performance or mental toughness. The highest of high performers are those that understand their mental narratives, their intellectual narratives, and their emotional narratives. And they know how to balance and regulate between the two. I think we have a long way to go to teach people how to actually process these things, how to create the spaces to give them permission to communicate about these things, and to remove the stigma so that there's no shame and blame around struggles that's just a part of being human, right? Like, we are so quick to judge and criticize, and what we really need is objective and non-judgmental spaces to allow people to be human.
Exactly. So this is going to lead into the next question, but I feel like me and you both have very common thoughts on this. I think the leading through vulnerability is going to be one of the things that this place of leaders that, like, say, me and you bring to the table, but then also this part where we're not in victimhood, we're actually in ownership. Can you kind of expand on that part, like where you feel like those two things are what more men need to see?
Yeah, I mean, look, my reason for existence, my belief, my stated purpose in life at this point is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs. And the truth of the matter is that I can't tell you how often I've shared from a place of vulnerability, sometimes still speaking from the wound because it isn't even scarred yet, but it literally transforms people in front of me because it's not viewed as vulnerable and weak. It's actually received as strength when it's delivered in a way that comes from a position of ownership. It's not complaining and whining, though there's a space for that too, because guess what? We're human. But there also is a moment of, like, after you have your little pity party for a minute, it's what are you going to do about it and how are you going to improve yourself moving forward? Now, I am somebody that's dealt with deep levels of shame in my life that affected me in ways for decades that I wasn't aware of. As a result of that, I also had anger in my life, but 99.9% of people never knew I was an angry person. But the three people I cared about most, my wife and my kids, were the ones that would get these things. And it would come across like this. My wife would say something as simple as, "Hey, honey, what do you want to do with the kids this weekend?" But my shame and my anger filter would cause me to hear it this way. Hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father here recently, so what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend? Well, you better damn well believe I'm going to defend the shit out of that, right? And what do? I get defensive, I puff up, and I rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last few days to show her I'm a good husband and father. That wasn't even what she asked. Now, that is complete victimhood because I'm getting into a defensive place. I'm taking it as shame and blame. I'm receiving something, and it has nothing to do with what she actually said. I'm fabricating a reaction now because of the shit that I haven't dealt with in myself to address whatever insecurities and deficiencies I feel within myself that I feel like are being challenged. And yet, what have I done? I've reacted to something that she didn't say, and now I've created damage. That takes more time, energy, and resources for both of us to neutralize, diffuse, and actually regain trust. And so why do I say this? Because here's the reality. I am a big believer that the trash from our past is typically the greatest cause of everything that is wrong in our lives. What's the trash from our past? It's the emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditions that create a set of cellular memory and a set of beliefs that your life only further validates until you break it. Right? It's how you react when your spouse looks at you incorrectly when you loaded the dishwasher, and it has nothing to do with your spouse. It has everything to do with how your dad looked at you when you were 7 years old and couldn't do anything to his standards. And you'd get punished for doing it wrong without even knowing that it was wrong. Right? Because they never showed you the right way to do it. But it's like if you understand that like that is putting yourself into a position of ownership by recognizing, oh, I'm reacting in this moment. I'm not responding in this moment. It's a game changer. But the truth of the matter is there's 4 things that we all seek and desire. And the only way to step fully into ownership is to understand this. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected, and they're not the same thing. We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected. These last 2 are the things that we do the most. We want the most, but they don't happen unless the first 2 do. So the second you feel not safe, not protected, not seen and understood, not connected, what do? We tend to protect ourselves. Imagine a 35-gallon black trash bag you're holding up in front of your face. Now that becomes your invisible and tangible layer of armor. That's what I would wear in that moment that my wife was communicating to me, which immediately diluted the impact of what she actually said. I couldn't hear it clearly. So one of the things that I teach is the second that we protect, we have to ask ourselves, how, if I'm holding up this invisible armor, could I ever expect my wife, my kids, my clients, my friends, my community members, my extended family to see who I am, what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, my heart, my intent, my soul, my desires, my boundaries, my value, my worth, delivered through this opaque force field? And that's assuming that they're not carrying their own. That's going to further dilute the message because we typically have 2 layers of disconnection. So the second you protect yourself, you guarantee you will disconnect yourself from who you are and what you want. And the second you protect yourself, you guarantee you will disconnect yourself from being seen and understood and connected at the deepest level, which prevents you from being able to step into ownership. So what does it look like in today's world? We unpacked anger. We've moved through this. It's been a massive shift. But I always tell people today, too, my wife and I have been together for 20 years. We hid from each other unconsciously for about 14, and she's only felt completely emotionally safe with me for just about 4. But it's also not a coincidence that we have the best relationship, the deepest communication, the most amount of intimacy, the best business, the best home life with our children that we've ever had. And now if I react in a moment, I can step into ownership instead of reacting in victimhood and say, hey, babe, I reacted to what you just said, which told me that maybe I didn't hear you correctly. Can you say that one more time so I can try to listen with a more neutral ear? And if I can't do so, can we pause this and revisit it later so that I don't create any damage right now? That's ownership. It's not that we don't react ever. It's not that we don't feel these emotions. It's that we can acknowledge them, understand them, and communicate about them real time in a way that actually frees ourselves and everyone in our environment. That's ownership. And that's what I believe we're capable of doing when we lead with vulnerability and we lead with honesty and transparency, because it's not about being right. It's about getting it right.
Man, we could just turn these mics off and just shut this thing down right now. And people would get so much value just from that. That lesson right there is the communication part is so important and so valuable. And so many people do not do that because they stay in the wounds and they stay in that victim mentality. I just want to say, like, for me, I heard you and I'm going to make household changes and just the communicative approach I do. So I hope that the listeners do the same thing. One of the things for me is, your people's identity. People just stay stuck on their identity. For me, it was the basketball player, the athlete. For you, What does that look like? How do we combat it? And how do we communicate it? Because we're talking about communicating with others on this podcast. And I think that's a huge part of man's mental health, but just mental health in general.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, because I do think that many men, because of the dynamics of of which we've already explained and the timelines, there are many men that I just had a complete brain fart, so I'm going to own it on real time, because I had a thought process and then it just evaporated from my head. The identity piece. I think there are many of us who, especially high performers, who again learned to receive love, validation, and connection through performance. Why do I say that? Because we get our identities wrapped up in the areas that we get acknowledged, that we get love, that we get validation, that we get connection, that we feel true to ourselves. Even though that performative nature is often not who we are, it's what we do. And what I see so often is men tying their identity to what they do instead of who they are. And I've walked that exact same path. Maybe not as deeply as some others, but I definitely did. And when I, had a $10 million business when I was 27 with some other business partners, and my bank account was full and I found myself empty, it changed the path, but at the same time, it didn't change quickly. It took a lot of work and a lot of effort, and it wasn't until almost 8 years after that, when I decided to exit that business, that I was able to really honestly wrestle with who I am, who I've been, as well as who I'm becoming. Right? It's a difficult thing, because change in and of itself is inevitable in life, but change is hard. And when we're used to getting love, validation, and connection, or money, or results on the other side of an action, it's difficult to break those actions, even if they're creating damage in other places in our lives, because it's what our reward system has learned to chase. It's where we place the value. It's where we place the intent and the focus. And so I think identity can evolve. But I also believe that many people have an adopted identity, meaning they are living their lives based on someone else's standards. Typically their parents, sometimes society, maybe it's a mentor. They're doing things for someone else, or because they believe that this is the path that's going to make me okay. I walked the same path. I believed, and I didn't know it then, but I believed that if I built a business of success, if I built prominence, if I did things in the community, that I might just be someone that people wanted to be around. And in reality, I did a lot of really cool things, but I still found myself lonely, isolated, and disconnected, because I lived in this performative and protective state. Until you have the courage to ask yourself the deeper questions, until you have the courage to find in and stand in your truth, until you have the courage to recognize, like, oh, man, my identity is not actually aligned with who I am and who I want to become, and have the courage to say that, it's really difficult to evolve and change. But I do believe that you can choose the change you want, or you can choose to change when you don't want change. Either way, you're going to change. I'd rather be in the driver's seat, right? It aligns even with the same concept that I teach around embracing pain to avoid suffering, right? It's a choice. It's how do we choose to move and evolve ourselves, right? Here's the reality. Pain is short-term. It's intermittent. It's caused as a direct result, and it heals and goes away once that direct result is alleviated. That's the definition of pain. Suffering, though, we often call chronic pain instead of what it really is. Suffering. Chronic pain changes the definition by putting that adjective in front of it, because it's no longer short-term. It's no longer intermittent, and it doesn't alleviate once the cause is removed. That's suffering. And we don't want to admit that suffering exists, particularly when it's a direct result of our choices. Even if they're unconscious choices, your words, actions, and behaviors represent who you are to the world. The world will never judge you based on your intent. It will only ever judge you based on your words, actions, and behaviors. And so here's the reality. We can learn to embrace the pain of hitting the gym for 30 minutes a day to avoid the suffering of aches and pains of a sedentary lifestyle. We can embrace the pain of the difficult conversation with our spouse to avoid a loveless marriage or being stuck in one when we want out, and the suffering that comes from that. We can avoid the difficult conversation and embrace the pain of the difficult conversation of having our kids put away their mobile devices at the dinner table to avoid the suffering of years of lost meaningful conversation and connection that you'll never get back. As a business owner, you can embrace the pain of firing your top salesperson to avoid the suffering of losing all your other top talent and having stagnation because they were the greatest cancer in your culture. The reality of it is identity is as much the core of who you already are as much as it is about what your choices are choosing in who you're becoming and what your words, actions, and behaviors are communicating to the world about who you are. That's the piece that a lot of people don't pay attention to. It's not just this box that you live and exist within. Identity is a living and breathing and evolving component of our lives, and it is a choice. We get to identify with who we want to be. That's identity.
One of the things, that was an amazing answer, and one of the things that I think what you shared was people don't realize how much adversity really is a gift. How that is just a resistance for growth. Like when you start feeling that resistance, go toward that resistance. And as you're going through the resistance, then you'll realize that it's redirecting you because you're out of alignment and you're growing. And what you served you in the past doesn't serve you again.
That's right.
Thoughts?
I always say that pain and perspective both point you towards what's important if you're paying attention.
Absolutely. And one of the things too is the way that you use storytelling to deliver a message, to deliver the purpose and what you're wanting to get across is amazing. And I'm just sitting back and I'm just like, wow, like I can see why all these companies want you to come and give these speeches, but also you're an amazing human being, but you're also such an amazing communicator. And so,
thank you.
You know, I can't imagine the mental part that you went through as a child going in through that, 7 to 13 year spot, grow through it, feel like, hey, I got this covered. My identity's performance based because that's what people want me to do. That's why I'm on stage, is to perform so them can learn the lesson. And then later on in life realize, oh, maybe I didn't work on myself as much. Maybe this would, now I'm getting navigated to work on myself.
Yeah.
How does that land for you?
It's real. It's interesting because if I think back to those years, in the first few months after the injury, I had a number of surgeries and was in and out of the hospital. But in one of those very first instances, I was working with a child life specialist, and there's somebody that helps kind of navigate the social emotional components for children in healthcare facilities. And we were doing an activity, and she gave me a doll and casting material. And I took the casting material and I literally wrapped head to toe every component of the doll. Now, a 7-year-old's communicating in that moment, I need a layer of protection around me. Leave me alone. Stop poking me with needles. Like, give me a minute. And that spoke very loudly to her, and she advocated on my behalf in that experience to give me a little bit of breathing room. But I will tell you that most of the focus after the injury was on healing myself physically. And what's interesting is maybe because of the performative elements I'd already fallen into, nobody believed that I needed to go to therapy. My brother went to therapy because he watched it happen. But like even my mom says today, and I don't want her to carry any negative feeling or shame around this or blame, but she'll even say, she's like, Brian, like we literally thought you were good. And here's the truth. Like I wasn't. I just buried it because I didn't really know any different. And it was always around like being tough and showing up and doing things. But there's also a lot that happened in that period that shaped this, that again, I think became performative for a different reason. I get out of the hospital and I've got a teddy bear in between my arm because my arm needs to heal at 90 degrees. And 60 to 70% of people would just stare at me. Now, what happens when people stare at you? They are writing your story for you without giving you an opportunity to write it yourself. They're making assumptions, they're making judgments, they're making stories in their head about what has or hasn't happened to this person. And I just wanted people to ask me a question. So then the people that were brave enough to ask the question would come up to me and say, Brian, what happened to you? And I'd look them deadpan in the eye and I'd say I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn off. Now I got really used to people's jaws hitting the floor. And once they would pick those back up, 99% of them would pause and they'd turn to my parents for validation. which told me what? They didn't believe me. They didn't believe what I was sharing with them and telling them. They didn't believe my story. They didn't believe the story that I'm living and wearing. They didn't believe me. It was too audacious. It was too crazy. That can't be what happened. Okay, but it did, and my parents would immediately validate it. And then those same people would view me through their lens of what they'd be capable of in my situation, immediately limiting me and telling me all the things I was and wasn't going to do for the rest of my life. So the performative nature was also a chip on my shoulder to prove to the world of what I was going to be able to do. And if the world wasn't going to believe me, then I had this drive and this passion that I was going to become someone that the world couldn't refuse. The world couldn't ignore. Now, it took a long story of arc for it to come full circle, because it wasn't until 32 years old that I felt emotion for the very first time. I'd shut it off so hard. That spigot was locked down. Armor was Fort Knox thick. It was a moment with my 2-year-old daughter at the time that brought me to tears on the couch. And I was joy. It was joy and love and happiness. And when that raw emotion is coming out, I'm starting to realize how pale in comparison everything else was I'd ever experienced in my life. My wife had joked for years that I was sympathetic, not empathetic, yet internally I'm going crazy with everything I'm feeling. I just couldn't express it and use it in a way that allowed me to be accessible and connect with others through an empathetic way. It was true. You can't have empathy without emotion. But then what I realized, and the work that I did in that period of time helped me understand that when I shut off physical pain because it exceeded my ability to cope, I shut off mental pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain too for 25 years and didn't know it. Human connection is not human connection without emotion. I used to believe human connection was just about vulnerability and authenticity. Nope. Human connection without emotion is not human connection. And so it changed everything in that phase of my life from just a mental toughness and performative type approach to truly like an integrated understanding. But this is even the divide when most people start doing work on themselves that catches most folks. They will do the work. They'll go to therapy. They'll have ahas. They'll hire a coach. They'll get clarity. They'll compress time. They'll see things that they haven't seen before. They'll understand things about themselves that they haven't before. And then in their brains, they're like, I'm good. But their bodies haven't had time to catch up. And they haven't had the ability to retrain the programming of their body. And so those cells still react. They still react. And all of a sudden, you're still feeling this way. But no, I know I'm good. And I know what I need to do and change. And I know what I need to heal. But I'm still feeling this way. Because there's a lack of alignment between your intellectual and your emotional narratives, and you've not done the work deep enough to get clear on what the emotional narrative is actually telling you and to disrupt and pattern interrupt that cellular memory so you can reprogram it towards what you really want in this world. And it is possible. I promise you it is, because I've done it for myself, and I've helped hundreds of people through this same process, being able to start to actually embody and understand what their physiological symptoms are pointing them towards, independent of what their thoughts and what their beliefs are. That's the divide that keeps most people stuck in this whole game. Because again, it's not just mental. Until you complete that 18-inch journey from your head to your heart, you're going to be incomplete as a human.
So Brian, you have this amazing mission. Let's talk about that, and then we're getting close to time, and so I want to be just,
we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as we possibly can, right? And I say that knowing that 99.999% of people will never pay me $1 in this world. But I do believe in what I call collective impact, and I do believe in what I say is that moved people move people. I made a decision on the hospital bed when I was 7 years old, seeing people dying in the ICU next to me because of a terminal illness, that I wasn't going to get stuck by the things that had happened to me, but instead get moved by what I could do with them. And I realized that the more I move, the more I can move others. And moved people move people. But what is suffering? Most of it's here internal, and there's 4 roots to suffering. Suffering is almost always created by one of these things. It's the things that are left unsaid, the things that we lack permission to feel or say, the things that we lack the words to articulate or understand, or the things that are left undone. And so I live my life every day congruently to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs, because when I speak my experiences, it often gives people permission to feel or say things that they haven't maybe ever or in a long time. And it gives them words to articulate and understand, and a path to take action and say and do the things that are necessary so they can alleviate their own level of suffering. Again, that's ownership, is actually putting yourself in the position to realize that you're the only person who can elevate you beyond that state. You're the only person who can raise your frequency. You're the only person who can step into joy, freedom, and fulfillment through clarity and alignment and awareness and intentionality. But it does take a little bit of work. I will tell you, though, that it will pay the greatest dividends of anything you do ever in your life if you actually commit to the path. Because what we all want is freedom. And freedom exists just on the other side of having anything about yourself that you need to justify, protect, or defend. It's being so clear in who you are that you're unwavering in any environment, and that is freedom. That's the mission I have in this world, is to show people that it's possible and show them how to get there. And so, yeah, man, we put out a ton of free content. We do a lot in the world and in the community, and it's always, for me, impact first. When I lead with impact, when I lead with relationships, when I lead with value, everything else always takes care of itself.
Yeah, it's amazing how God, the universe, does that. Just takes care of everything. Everything is once we realize it's a byproduct of doing something else, it's amazing. Yeah. So, my friend, I just want to say thanks again for showing up, giving extreme value, sharing your amazing knowledge, and impacting a ton of lives that were able to hear this podcast. And also want to say how much you've impacted me just on this 30-minute conversation.
I appreciate you, Dwayne. I love the work that you're doing. I want to thank you for the effort and intention to do this effort over these 30 days. If you'd not done this, I wouldn't have had the ability to come in here and create impact. And so I want to honor the effort and the work that you're doing and what you're stepping into, because literally you are showing up to win and you are showing other people what's possible. And so I have to say a moment of thank you on that as well.
Thanks, my man. I appreciate that. I'm receiving that, and I am looking forward to finishing this 30 days, but also being able to learn from all 30 great speakers. I just feel today my cup is full and running over, and I can't wait to go journal here in a little bit. And so this is episode number 12 with Brian Bogart. Thank you so much, my friend. This is Show Up to Win presents ShowUp2Heal. Episode 13 is with Kyle Miller tomorrow, same time. Talk to y'all soon. Bye. Thank you for watching another episode of Show Up to Win presents ShowUp2Heal. Please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. Thank you.